While recently doing a whole lot of AI research for a special project everybody keeps saying quantum computing is going to change the world. Now that sounds exciting right up until you realize the world includes encryption, cybersecurity, dispatch systems, criminal evidence, and pretty much every digital lock that we trust not to fall apart before lunch. So is quantum here today, or is this still science fair meets billion-dollar hype? And what happens to public safety when the math starts fighting back? That's coming up next on TiPS, Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm a NINA-certified ENP, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I bring you the latest, most informative, and sometimes mathematically impossible takes on emergency communications. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into quantum computing, not the fake movie version where somebody stares dramatically at a glowing cube and then suddenly hacks the Pentagon in 6 seconds. I mean the real-world version, the one where government agencies, security experts, and technology companies are already preparing for what happens when today's encryption is no longer enough. NIST finalized its first 3 post-quantum cryptography standards in August of 2024, and CISA has already been publishing guidance in 2026 targeted to help organizations identify which technology categories are going to need to support those new standards. So that should tell you that this is no longer a science fiction side quest. All the adults in the room have started moving the furniture. So let's talk about whether quantum is really here yet, what it can and cannot do right now, and why public safety leaders need to care before somebody that sits over in IT says, "We'll deal with that later," which is typically corporate code for "we plan to panic inefficiently." What quantum is without making everybody regret hitting play. Okay, let's start off real simple. Your regular computers work with bits, ones and zeros. These are tiny, little electronic light switches. They're on or off, yes or no, coffee, no coffee, civilization or chaos. Quantum computers, on the other hand, use qubits or quantum bits. And qubits are a little like me. They don't like to behave. They can exist in a combination of states. And if you scale enough of them correctly, they can tackle certain classes of problems very differently from classical machines. Now, that doesn't mean quantum computers are automatically better at everything. They're not. So they're not going to replace your CAD workstation, your call handling server, or Karen in records who still likes to print emails for no reason at all. But what they are good at least in theory and eventually in practice, is solving some kinds of heavy math problems in a way that's much faster than classical computers. Now that matters because modern cybersecurity depends on math problems being really hard to solve. So if quantum can make these problems easier, then a whole lot of the digital trust infrastructure that we rely on today starts sweating. And yeah, there's been some real progress. Back in December of 2024, Google announced its Willow chip, saying that it demonstrated error correction progress that moves the field closer to useful large-scale quantum computing. IBM's roadmap for last year says it was going to focus on quantum plus HPC workflows and was progressing towards fault-tolerant systems. And they were targeting a large-scale fault-tolerant system by 2029. So that's not the same thing as saying quantum has arrived and it's going to replace the server in the back room next Tuesday. But it does mean that this is advanced way beyond lab coat fantasy and into real strategic planning. So is quantum here today? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that real quantum hardware does exist, and real companies are making measurable progress, and real security standards are already being changed because of it. And no, in the sense that the kind of mature, large-scale fault-tolerant quantum in machines needed to break today's widely used public key encryption at any kind of operational scale isn't sitting on a desk in a PSAP basement. Not yet. Why public safety should care right now and not someday. This is where a lot of people make the mistake. They hear quantum isn't fully here yet, and they translate that into, great, I can ignore it until after retirement. Now, sorry, that's not how this works. Public safety public safety must care right now, because the transition is not about buying quantum computers. It's about protecting the systems you've already got before somebody else eventually has one powerful enough to break the security that protects them. Think about it this way. Inside your ECC, your record system, CGIS-related access controls, your remote administration tools, VPNs, cloud connections, radios tied to IP backbones, your logging systems, body-worn video archives, evidence platforms, facility access systems, and enterprise 911 integrations all depend in some way on cryptography, certificates, identities, software trust chains, and secure updates. If those cryptographic foundations age out badly, this stops being a nerd conference panel and starts becoming an operational risk. Then there's also the harvest now, decrypt later problem. That simply means an adversary can steal encrypted data today and then hang on to it, making a bet that future quantum capabilities is going to let them decrypt it later. So even if your current systems aren't being currently cracked by quantum, any sensitive information they hold that's got long-term value could still be exposed down the road. NIST's post-quantum transition work explicitly frames the transition as necessary because future quantum computers may be able to break current public key cryptography. And that means organizations are going to need to prepare before that day arrives. Now, for public safety, that matters in a big way because even though some information has a shelf life of minutes, like an active incident log, other information has a shelf life of years. Things like facility schematics, security plans, investigative records, critical infrastructure diagrams, responder identities, network diagrams, medical or personal data that's tied to an emergency incident. Because if that stuff gets vacuumed up now and then opened later, that's still a problem. A very large, very expensive, very congressional hearing kind of problem. And let's face it, there are some agencies out there still trying to find out who's got the admin password to the paging server. So no, we probably should not wait until quantum becomes a 5-alarm fire. What the impact on public safety will actually look like. Now let's separate the real impact from the buzzword bingo. The first real impact on public safety is not going to be dispatching incidents with quantum magic. Now the first impact is going to be cybersecurity modernization. That means inventorying where your systems today use vulnerable public key cryptography, figuring out which one of your vendors support post-quantum cryptography, planning your certificate and key management changes, get your procurement language updated, and making sure that the stuff you buy today is at least capable of surviving tomorrow. Just back in January of this year, CISA released product category guidance that was specifically designed to help organizations identify that hardware and software categories that are expected to support post-quantum cryptography. Now that is a giant neon blinking sign that says, start asking your vendors harder questions. The second impact is going to be vendor pressure. Public safety doesn't build most of its own mission-critical software. It buys it. That means your quantum readiness is only as good as the weakest vendor who says, we're monitoring the situation all the time while quietly hoping nobody asks them for a roadmap. So if I were asking vendor questions right now, I'd want to know things like, are you using NIST standard post-quantum algorithms inside your future plans? And when are your products going to support migration? Which one of your components use certificates or public key exchange that may be vulnerable later? And one of my favorites, can your architecture support crypto agility, which simply means the ability to swap out algorithms without replacing the whole product? Because the crypto agility is really the name of the game. If your system is built like a concrete bunker from 1998, changing cryptography later may feel like replacing an engine while the car's doing 80 down the interstate. Now the third impact is long-range innovation, but this is the part a lot of people overhype. Quantum may eventually help with things like optimization, logistics, simulation, and perhaps certain modeling problems. Down the road, maybe it'll help with things like evacuation modeling, supply placement, traffic routing during a major incident, or complex resource optimization. But that's not the urgent public safety use case applicable today. Today's urgent use case is making sure tomorrow's quantum and its advances don't undermine the security of today's public safety systems. Heck, IBM itself frames much of the near-term value around quantum working alongside high-performance computing and not replacing everything with the Star Trek coffee maker. So yeah, the public safety impact is real, but it is much less dispatching by qubit and much more stop leaving your digital front door protected by math with an expiration date. Reality check. Is quantum real? Yeah. Is quantum risk real? Oh yeah. What about quantum panic? Well, that's optional. We're not quite at the point where a county communications center needs to rip out everything and replace it with a cryogenic refrigerator and a PhD from MIT. But we are at the point where leadership needs to be asking whether their technology stack is prepared for post-quantum migration. This is one of those moments where public safety can either be strategic or be surprised. And historically, well, let's just say the industry has occasionally treated strategic like an optional menu item. Now, the good news is federal standards are emerging. Backup algorithms are still being selected, and guidance is already available. NIST finalized its first 3 standards in 2024, selected HQC in 2025 as a backup encryption algorithm that's expected to become a standard later, and continues building out the transition path. That means the direction of travel is much clearer now than it was just a couple of years ago. So the answer is not fear. The answer is preparation. The bottom line. Look, the bottom line is this. Quantum's not here in a way that hype merchants want you to believe, but it is far too real to dismiss. For public safety, the biggest near-term impact is not some shiny new dispatch toy. It's the need to prepare cybersecurity, procurement, vendor management, and long-life data protection for a post-quantum future. So in plain English, you don't need to buy quantum, but you need to buy with quantum in mind. Because the agencies that ask the smart questions now are going to look prepared later. And the ones that don't are eventually going to be sitting in a conference room with an expensive consultant, a breach report in front of them, and a very awkward silence after somebody asks, who failed to take care of this back in 2026? That wraps up today's episode of TiPS, Today in Public Safety. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you found this valuable. For more updates and insights, follow me on social media at Fletch911. And you can visit 911tips.com, where you'll find a complete archive of all of my previous episodes. My blogs are available at Fletch.tv, and my professional website is at Fletch911.com. Stay safe. Thanks so much for listening. And if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG 911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10 spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.